Yo, what is up? It is your boy Zether, back at it again with the finale to What If Deku Went to Shiketsu High. Now, I know a lot of you guys are like, what? The finale already? And to answer that question, yes, this is essentially how I'm going to be doing my videos from now on. I'm going to basically do first part, second part, second part, and I'm going to start uploading almost daily. I can't promise daily, but I'm gonna try almost daily. Okay, my old upload schedule, those days you will always get an upload, but the other days you may get uploads or may not. That's essentially how we're just gonna be running with things for now. So with that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the finale to this video, and with nothing else to say, let's get into the recap and then get started. Alright guys, so on the last part we had pretty much gone over Deku and, Bakugou's little rivalry that they had going on as kids. How Deku ended up getting a shape-shifting quirk or white blood cell manipulation, where he can basically control what he looks like. We had basically ended up covering a bunch of arcs such as, the USJ, the UA Sports Festival, as well as the internships, and we had pretty much left off when they had basically came back to school. And they basically just arrived, and their teacher basically told them that, they're going to have a lot of things to work on as soon as they get back. So this is what we're now actually going to be covering. So with that being said, I hope you guys are ready to get started. So yeah, let's go. All right, so anyways, this is when they all return after their internships to basically go to Gang Orca, as he would proceed to tell them all that he hopes that they got a lot of training and that they actually refine their quirks, or their fighting styles, or at least learned how to patrol around places, or got to learn the ins and outs of becoming a pro hero. As some of them would begin to tell them that they actually learned quite a couple of things. As this is when Cammy would walk up to Deku and tell him if he's ready and if he wants to go study after school. As Deku would get a sly smirk and he would proceed to say of course he is. As this is when Deku would proceed to look at Gang Orca, as he would say, alright, so essentially what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be having a fight with all of you against me, and I want to see how you guys will fare. But before that, we're actually going to be doing one-on-ones. As everybody in the class would look at each other and say, what? We're doing those again? Also, sorry for that little noise you guys heard. But anyways, they would say, what? We're doing those again? As, Gang Orca would say, yeah, we're doing those right now. As this is when the rest of the class would proceed to be like, okay. As they would all pretty much be called up one by one, and everybody would do a little bit better than they did in the original part. Except, this time, Deku would do a lot better than he did originally. See, this time Deku's actually, gotten a lot further in terms of his hand-to-hand combat skills, and he has that technique by Edgeshot. He would have basically turned himself inside out, just like Edgeshot can, and he would have essentially rushed straight at Gang Orca, as he would have, surrounded him, and then he would have proceeded to hit him on the back of the head, sending Gang Orca down on the ground. As Gang Orca would have basically been there, and then Deku would have essentially, used his bone quirk to basically stab into both of Gang Orca's arms, stabbing him right into the ground, as Gang Orca would let out a howl. And this is when Deku would say, so, did I pass? As Gang Orca would say, did you really have to take it so far, kid? As Deku would say that there was no other way he was going to beat him. As Gang Orca would say that, it's true, but oh my god, that hurts. As Deku would go back and Gang Orca would tell him that he needs to talk to him after class. As Cammy would look at Deku and, give him a little bit of a stare, as Deku would say, yeah, totally. As, this is when we would now have the class end, and everybody else would give their terms. See, Inasa would have actually ended up doing a lot better, seeing as he got, he got the push that he needed from Todoroki to basically push himself even further, to try to surpass that kid who thinks he's all this and that. As Inasa would have gone up, and he would have picked Gang Orca up with nothing but his wind quirk, as he would proceed to basically start just throwing him around like a ragdoll. As this is when Gang Orca would notice that he's getting overwhelmed by the students, as he would then proceed to say that, yeah, he needs to definitely give his all if he wants to beat this kid. As he would start shooting his mouth blasts at him, and this is when Inasa would proceed to, he'd do a pretty decent job. And by the end of everything, it would basically be Inasa's victory. He would have ended up sweeping Gang Orca off, and he would have surrounded him in an air prism, as Gang Orca just couldn't get free. And this this is when we would essentially go over to Cammy. See, she would put up a bunch of illusions to make Gang Orca, see different things, as she would proceed to create a bunch of different versions of her, and she would rush at him from different angles, kind of like fake shadow clones, I guess you could say. And she would end up catching Gang Orca off guard and landing a couple good hits on him, way better than she did in the first time. But nonetheless, Cammy would still end up winning, as she's not that good of a combat or one-on-one hero. She's more of a support hero, or somebody who can help you get the upper hand in a battle, yes. And, this is essentially how that's going to be going for now. Now, this is when Deku would be asked to stay after class, as Deku would proceed to get a bit of a scolding from, Gang Orca, as he would proceed to tell Deku that, he didn't have to take it that far, as Deku would say that he's sorry and that it won't happen again, as Gang Orca would say, good. As he would then tell Deku to go off somewhere, and Deku would basically grab his bags and go outside and meet with Cammy. As Deku would say that his mom's probably home by this point, and she would say, I know. As she would say, I guess we could go to my house. As she'd say, I guess it's time for you to meet my parents. As Deku would say, hold on now, meeting parents already? As she would say, yeah, I met your mom. As Deku would say, no, you haven't. He'd say, you just come over and we study and then you leave before you meet her. As she'd say, oh yeah. As Deku would say, yeah. As Cammy would say, well, there's a first time for everything. As she would grab Deku's arm and yank him to her house. As Deku would arrive and he'd proceed to have dinner with her parents. As, Cammy's dad would be staring right at Deku. As he would say, so, what are your intentions with my daughter? As Deku would say, sir, it's nothing like that. As this is when he would basically keep staring at Deku, giving him the death eyes. As Cammy would say, hey, dad, just leave him alone. He's a nice guy. As he would say, I'm sure he is. As she would say, well, he's the strongest in our class right now. He's really powerful, and he's definitely going to become one of the top 10 heroes when he finishes high school. As the dad would say, is that so? What's your quirk, kid? As Deku would say, oh, I have a shape-shifting quirk. As he would say, oh, so you're a shapeshifter. Okay. As he would then look at him and say, I guess you're not that bad. Your quirk seems pretty powerful. As this is when, Deku would proceed to talk to, her dad one-on-one a little bit. As he would proceed to, whip a gun out right in his face and tell him that whatever he does to her, he's going to do to him. As Deku would give him that closed lips there, and he'd be like, word? And, the dad would look at him and be like, I already know. As this is when... This is when Deku... No, scratch all that. This is when Deku would proceed to basically go to Cammy's room, and they'd proceed to hang out for a bit. And after a bit, Deku would say that he has to go home. As he would proceed to basically order an Uber as he would be taken home, and he would arrive there as Inko would ask him where he was at. As he would tell her that he was at his girlfriend's house, and she would say, girlfriend? She would say, I didn't know you had a girlfriend. And she would say, yeah, I've pretty much had one ever since we started school. As she'd say, and I still haven't met this girl. Why? As Deku would say, it's just to see what had happened was... nice weather today, right? As Inko would say, don't try that right now, mister. As Deku would run off to his room and lock the door, as Inko's just like, you better have her come over tomorrow or you're gonna be 6 feet under. As Deku would be like, scary. As this is when we would have, Deku go back, as they would essentially be told on this day that in a week's time from now, they're going to be doing their final exams. And after that, they're actually going to be doing some forest training with UA. As, this is when Deku would proceed to say that, yeah, this is going to be really awesome. As, Deku would proceed to be thinking that things are going to go by a lot smoother than what he had expected. As, this is when he would proceed to basically talk to Cammy and tell her that she needs to come over and meet his mom, as she'd be terrified. But as soon as she arrives, Inko would be a sweetheart, and she would actually end up liking Cammy a lot. They would have a lot of things in common, and she would actually approve of Deku and Cammy. As, this is when we would proceed to basically have them just studying a bit. Real studying and this type of studying at the same time. As, they have their finals, and they essentially have to pretty much, learn a couple of things. As Deku doesn't really have to study that hard, but when he's studying Cammy, he's going crazy. But anyways, this is when they would proceed to do their written exam after the 1 week that they have to study, as Deku would have also ended up training Cammy in hand-to-hand combat, teaching her a couple of ins and outs of what she can do with her quirk, and teaching her a couple of unorthodox ways to use it. Maybe she can have it so that it looks like Cammy's about to hit them in places that they will not want to be hit. Or maybe she can create doppelgangers and hide them somewhere so that the people will think that she's hiding, and she can basically appear at them out of nowhere. She could be a sort of stealth hero. As, Cammy would take that into account, and this is when they would essentially go over to the, to the finals, as they would take the written exam and everybody would proceed to pass it, seeing as nobody here is really dumb, I guess you could say, other than Inasa. But Inasa would have studied hard enough, and I believe that he would pass. So, now, this is when we would now have the actual exams, which is not actually going to consist of fighting some teachers or, anything like that. See, in this version of events, UA School would have actually lent over to Shiketsu a couple of robots that they could have basically used to basically see how they would perform in a real battle. As everybody would proceed to have combat training with a bunch of robots, as they would end up passing and doing very great things. Everybody in the class would end up passing, and they would end up telling them that they need to pack their bags and that they're going to be leaving in 3 days to go to the forest training. As they would tell their parents to, sign a waiver, and everybody would go home and basically get that signed, and Deku and Cammy would go over to Deku's house. His Inko's not there, and Deku would begin to study with Cammy. He would hit the books. He would start doing history, math, science. You already know, all the basics. As this is when we would now basically have Deku and everybody else just in the forest training. See, a couple of things are actually going to go by a bit different. See, in the back scenes, there's actually a couple of things that would have actually been happening. See, all for one, even though he would have lost Shigaraki, he still would have had one more person under his sleeve. That being, the other villains that he's basically been keeping an eye on. As essentially, all for one would have pretty much had it so that he could essentially have Dabi as his person, his new hero, his new successor, as he would have found him out on the streets, and he would have found out about Endeavor. And seeing as this is something that he could hold over as leverage over him, he would have decided that Dabi would have been the best fit for the job. As he would have created a doppelganger of Kurogiri, and they would still have their portal opener. So the attack on the forest training arc will actually still end up happening in this version of events. Now, everything that you would expect to happen would essentially go by normal, except when Class 1A actually gets thrown over the cliff and they have to, arrive there personally by walking. Shiketsu would have essentially arrived there by bus. And 2 hours after they arrived... Oh, no. This is not good. Okay. Is this still recording? My laptop closed. I'm terrified. Hold on. Give me a second. By bus. Sorry, the audio ended up cutting out. Anyways, this is when, basically they would proceed to see that Shiketsu's just standing there. They're just chilling, and they're already eating the food that Mandalay ended up cooking up. As they would say, what? They didn't even have to go through that? As, Deku would just be sitting there, as Bakugou would walk up to him and crack his knuckles and say, well, it's fine for me, I got more training out of this. As Deku would say, I doubt it was really that much. As he would say, I'm pretty sure all you did was waste your energy. As Katsuki would look towards, Deku, and he would say, as this is when Deku would say, so, it's been a while, Kachan. As Bakugou would say, yeah, it has been. As they would look towards each other and say, so, you gonna be ready for that rematch? As Bakugou would say that he knows he is. As this is when Deku would proceed to, have a little sly smirk at Bakugou. As Bakugou would give him, the same thing. And this is when Kota would walk up to Bakugou and tell him, why is he here? He's just gonna end up dying like every other hero does. As Kota would then punch Bakugou in the nuts. As he's the one who ends up getting the Deku treatment in this version instead of, Midoriya. So, this is when, Bakugou would have explosions blast off his hands as he would say, you do that again and I promise, kid, I'll put you 6 feet under. As Mandalay would grab Kota and tell him that it was on accident, that, he's just a little kid, he should just let it slide. As Bakugou would just begrudgingly have to let it go. As one of the pro heroes that's going to be watching them is actually, the one who's telling him. As Bakugou would just be like, well, tell that brat not to do that again. As Mandalay would look at Bakugou and say, sheesh, he's rude. She would say, well, I mean, it makes sense. He hit him in his... As she would say, no, never mind. And she would proceed to tell them all that they're good to go eat. As everybody in Class 1A would proceed to essentially go over to the table and start munching away. They would start eating all their food that they can. And this is when, nighttime would befall them. As they would essentially have the hot spring situation, and Deku, as Kota would basically end up stopping Mineta from essentially climbing over, he would still end up falling over, and this is when this would lead Deku to pretty much rushing over to him and catching him at full speed. He would end up catching Kota and still learning about Kota's backstory and why he acts the way that he does. As when he arrives back to his people, he would actually tell Cammy that, that Kota kid it's quite a sad story that he has. As Cammy would say, what do you mean? As Deku would proceed to essentially tell her that, what happened with him. And she would say, oh, that's awful. It's I guess we should start being a little nicer to him. As Deku would say, yeah, I'd say we should. As this is when they would essentially, the very next day would pop up, and we would essentially have them just train and have a normal day, up until when nighttime befalls them. As they would essentially be doing their hide and seek stuff, and they would essentially be eating their bowls of, curry. As Deku would see that Kota walks off, and he would, just like in the original, end up walking over to him, with Cammy basically asking him if he wants her to tag along. As Deku would say that no, it's fine. He can handle it on his own. As this is when, Cammy would say, nah, I'm coming along with you. As this is when Bakugou would see what's going on, and he would end up tagging along, asking why they're going over here. As Deku would explain to them, whispering, as Kota would be far away from this at this point, as they would arrive over there, and this is when Deku would essentially basically start talking to Kota, as Bakugou and Cammy are just sitting there, kind of just eavesdropping on what's going on. As Deku would be getting through to Kota slowly but surely, and this is when Kota would get up asking him what he knows. I bet he's never had to lose anything. He's probably never known what it's like to lose something. As Deku would say, maybe he is right, but that doesn't mean that just because he lost something he can give up on heroes or the Hero Society. That's not what his parents would have wanted. As Kota would say, you don't know what my parents would have wanted. They were the greatest heroes, the water hose heroes. As Deku would say, I know. As this is when Muscular would appear out of nowhere saying, the water hose heroes? That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. As he would rip off the cloak and say, so, are you one of their kids or something? As, Kota would be staring at him in awe saying, that's the guy. As this is when Deku would stare right at Muscular, as he stands to be about 7 feet tall, a giant, a behemoth of a man. As Deku would stare at him and look at Kota, as he would tell Kota to run, as he would tell Bakugou and Cammy to keep him safe, as they would say, no way, we're gonna help you, as Deku would say that they need to get him into hiding and they can come back as soon as they do. As Deku would tell Bakugou to tag along with Cammy, as he doesn't know if there's other villains, as Bakugou would begrudgingly say that he better have this covered, as Deku would say that he does. As this is when Muscular and Deku would get into a fight, as Muscular would take out his bones, and he would proceed to increase himself in size to basically match Muscular. He would then realize that Muscular's power and muscle augmentation quirk is way too powerful for him to handle, and this is when Deku would get an idea. Wait, that's muscles. That's a body part. He could do exactly what he's doing. As Deku would proceed to enlarge himself by the same amount that Muscular is, as he would grow to the same size of Muscular, but his muscle size would be 2 times the size of Muscular's. As we would then have Deku staring down at Muscular, as Muscular would say, now this is something I can work with. As Deku would proceed to fight Muscular one-on-one with nothing but his raw physical brute strength. But on top of the fact that he has that, he would also have his tenacity, his willpower, and his already enhanced martial arts combat and prowess. As by the end of it, 5 minutes would go down and Deku would have ended up taking down Muscular with ease and finesse, seeing that he would also have had the bones pop out of his knuckles, and he would have also essentially used his stretching power to basically catch Muscular off guard a couple of times. And he would have still ended up punching Muscular into the cliff. As this is when Cammy and Bakugou would arrive back, telling him if he's okay, as they would see a giant Deku standing there. As Bakugou would ask, Deku? As Deku would turn around and he would shrink back to his normal size, as he would tell them that they're after him. As Bakugou would say, what? As this is when Deku would proceed to tell, Bakugou that, they're after him. As Bakugou would say, I see. As this is when, they would proceed to run over and do the normal things that they do in canon, such as helping, Duple Arms with Tokiyami. They would then proceed to have Bakugou, shoot a bunch of explosions at him, taking him back to his base strength. And this is when they would arrive to where Moonfish is at. But with this time, having Tokiyami and all of them there, they would basically tell Tokiyami to use his quirk again, as he's basically the quickest way to take him down. As Tokiyami would unleash Dark Shadow, and right as he takes down Moonfish, Todoroki would blast his flames, with Todoroki shooting explosions at him to make him stop using the quirk. And this is when they would rush over to Uraraka and Suyu, as they would begin to save them. as this is when they would tell them that, they're here to save Bakugou. As they would say, so where's Bakugou then? As Deku would look around and say, what are you talking? As he would see that Bakugou's not there. As he would then ask Suyu and everybody else to throw them at that guy. As at this point, Mr. Compress would have been running away just like he did in canon. As Deku would get slingshotted over to him, as Deku would say that he's not going to be losing his best friend, as Deku would be flying over at top speeds, as right as he's about to grab onto him, Dabi would have went through the portal and would have smiled right at Deku, as he would say that he's never getting his friend back. As this is when Deku would proceed to hit the ground repeatedly, as he would say, damn it, damn it, damn it! Ugh, I lost him. Bakugou, I promise I'll get you back if it's the last thing I do. As the last thing he would have seen Bakugou do would have been, Deku, stay away. As he would have been taken in through the portal. And this is when Bakugou would have the normal things that would have happened in canon go down. As this version of Bakugou would have decided that he knows that Deku's going to come for him. And as soon as he does, they're going to both take down all of these villains. As this is when Deku would be at the hospital due to his quirk exertion. As they would all be at the same hospital that Class 1A was at. As this is when Deku would be listening into the conversation that All Might had with Momo, as he would go up to her and ask her if she could please give him the device, as that's his best friend. He doesn't know what he could do without him if he was to ever lose him. As Momo would understand where Deku was coming from, but she would tell him that he should just wait for the heroes. I mean, the heroes can handle it. As Deku would say that no, he promised he would save him, and that's something he's gonna keep. As Momo would begrudgingly accept and give Deku the device, as Deku would look right at what he has in his hands, as he would thank Momo for what she's doing for him, telling her that he's always going to remember this favor, as Momo would say that yeah, he better go before she can regret her decision. As this is when Deku would grab his device and ask Inasa and Senji if he wants to go along with them. As this is when they would both agree, and Cammy would actually ask if, she can tag along, as Deku would say that yeah, she definitely can. Her quirk will be extremely useful in this situation. As they would arrive, and instead of having Class 1A be the ones who pretty much go and save Bakugou, we would have a different scenario happening, with Shiketsu High actually being the ones who basically try to go save Bakugou. As this is when we would now have a lot of different things going down. See, they would proceed to do their normal things, except, normal things such as buying clothes, except, we would have it so that Senji's the one who buys it all, since he's actually the rich boy in the group. And they would proceed to essentially just find the same thing that they found in canon. And this is when they would see the Nomus and the explosion go off, as they would have rushed over to where they believed that Bakugou's at. As at this point, the heroes would have definitely arrived. And at this point, All Might would have been fighting against All for One, as they would have arrived and seen what was going down. And this is when Deku would have caught wind of what's happening. As, Dabi and the rest of them would have essentially been teleported away. As this is when Deku would see Bakugou. And Deku would tell Cammy to quickly create an illusion of Bakugou to make it seem like he's there. For Deku to basically have it so that he can essentially just sneak in there, grab Bakugou, and they can all get out of there. As that's what they would do, and that's what the plan would be. As Deku would have rushed towards Bakugou, grabbing him and telling him that they need to get out of here. They're just going to get in All Might's way. As Bakugou would tell him, no way. All Might's here and he could get hurt because of him. As Deku would say, what are you talking about, Bakugou? We have to go. As Bakugou would say, I'm sorry, I have to stay here. As Deku would say, well, if you're staying, I am too. As Bakugou and Deku would look towards each other and smile and chuckle, as they would proceed to basically tell Cammy and the rest of them to signal themselves to go off. As at this point, Dabi would have essentially still been there, as All for One would have never teleported him away, seeing that he thought that Dabi could be the one to finish All Might off. But before he knew it, Bakugou and Deku would have rushed straight towards Dabi's direction, as it would be guns blazing and be ready to take on Dabi, as Dabi would shoot his cremation flame straight at Deku. But this is when Deku would basically have Bakugou's shield in front of him, as he would shoot a full power explosion negating the effects and shooting it back, as Deku would proceed to basically grab Bakugou as he augments his arms and flings him straight towards Dabi. As Dabi would be caught off guard, as Bakugou would shoot a full power explosion straight at Dabi's face, scarring him beyond what he already had. At this point, Dabi's face would be pitch black, as Dabi would grab Bakugou's face and he would hold them right by his skull, as Deku would say, Kachan! As this is when, in a moment's notice, Deku would have something snap within him. His muscle augmentation copy ability would go crazy, as Deku would augment them to the most he's ever done it. He would compress the muscle density within himself, as he would proceed to essentially just rush and blitz straight towards Dabi, as Deku would throw a full power smash right at Dabi's face, as Dabi would be sent flying, as that hit would have ended up snapping Dabi's neck, and he would have ended up dying upon contact with the blow, as Dabi would be taken care of with that one attack, as Deku would then grab Bakugou, asking him if he was okay, as Bakugou would have a little bit of a burn mark on his face, a scar to remind him of what had gone down today, as Deku would end up looking towards Bakugou and tell him that he needs to take him away to the hospital, as this is when Deku would see that All Might struggling against All For One, as Deku would look towards him, and he would say that before he does that, he has to do something. As right as All Might was about to throw his smash at All For One, Deku would appear behind All For One and throw a full power smash of his own, as both of the hits would have collided in smashing All For One's head in, as this was not the result that he was actually expecting, but All Might would have smiled as he saw this young man basically throwing his life in to help All Might, as All Might would just be thinking that he would have been a worthy successor other than Mirio, as they would then take down All For One and Dabi in one fell swoop, as the League of Villains leaders would be no more. The only people that they have to look after each other would be nothing more than the weak people, as Toga, Spinner, Twice, those people would have never joined the League of Villains, seeing as the Stain influence was never there. And since All For One personally recruited Dabi, we would never have that entire situation happen with them. So this is essentially where the little incident, the Camino's City incident, I believe it's what it's called, would end up happening. And this is when everybody would be taken into the hospital, as All Might would be in critical condition, and this is when we would essentially have Deku in the hospital as well as Bakugou, as they would both be, out of juice, as they would both be on separate beds, as they would begin to trash talk each other, telling each other that, they could have done more than what they already did, as Bakugou and Deku would begin to start laughing as Kami and Uraraka would walk in. Uraraka being Bakugou's girl, and this is when Kami would ask Deku what was wrong with him. Why did he feel the need to interrupt in the way that he did? They were supposed to just save Bakugou and get out of there. As, Shiketsu would get scolded, but they would still nonetheless be allowed to take the provisional license, as we're now actually going to be skipping over to the provisional hero license, as this is when we would now have a couple of things going down. See, as soon as the things happen, as soon as the match starts, a couple of things would go down that we are actually waiting for. As, when they were seeing themselves outside, Deku and Bakugou would have decided that if they can get the chance, they're going to be having their final battle here to see who's the strongest and see who can actually be stronger than the other one. As after Bakugou had seen how strong Deku had gotten, he would have ended up taking the 1 month that they had of normal schooling to basically train his quirk up even more than what he had already done, pushing himself beyond his limits, and Recovery Girl would have had to come heal him multiple times, as Bakugou would have broken bones, and sweat, blood, and tears would have gone into his training, as Deku would have done the same, but not on the same scale. Instead, he would have essentially been training his muscle augmentation and how to compress it into himself, as this is when the battle would be announced and what they have to do, as Deku and Bakugou would basically look at each other from, where their respective arenas are, as Deku would rush towards Bakugou, and Bakugou would do the same, as Deku would say that they need to find a location where it can just be them, as Deku and Bakugou would basically run over to an open area where nobody else is at, and any other person that would have tried to sneak up on them, Bakugou and Deku would have just utterly destroyed and demolished before they could have even gotten a chance to do anything to them, as Deku and Bakugou would have utterly destroyed any of the competition that would have been around them, as at this point, Deku and Bakugou had all of their meters, and they would have already got every point that they needed, but they're not exactly going to end things off now, as Bakugou still hasn't gotten his 3rd point, as he wanted that one to be Deku, as they would stare down at each other and decide that this is going to be the final battle, as Deku would say that he's ready for this, as Bakugou would say that he better be ready, because what he has in store, he's not going to be able to hold back, as Deku would say that he wouldn't have it any other way, and this is when Bakugou would power himself up, and, psych himself up with his explosions, as he would have a bunch of them just popping off of his hands, as this is when we would have Deku essentially looking towards Bakugou, as he would tell him that he better be ready for what's to come, as Deku would augment his muscles to the same size as Muscular, as he would then begin to compress them down, as at this point Deku would be standing at 7 feet tall, as he would have, the claws come out, similar to Wolverine, and Deku would then proceed to tell Bakugou that he better be ready. As the battle would start, and before things could even get down, it would be utterly clear that Deku has the upper hand in terms of this battle. Bakugou would be trying every and anything that he can do, such as AP shots. He would have tried to go in for hand-to-hand combat, but seeing that Deku has he hasn't beat in terms of physical combat strength, Bakugou would have been forced to basically be on the defensive end, as after about 5 minutes of Bakugou basically trying to defend himself from Deku's blows and hard impact strikes, Bakugou would have been taken down by Deku, and this battle would have been shown that it would have been utterly useless for Bakugou to keep trying, as that muscle augmentation ability that Deku has was way too powerful for Bakugou to handle, as well as the bone, the stretching, the superior, hand-to-hand combat skills. It would be way too much for Bakugou to be able to handle in one sitting. As Bakugou would proceed to get overwhelmed by Deku, and Deku would proceed to hit all of Bakugou's markings, eliminating Bakugou, as he would smile at Bakugou, telling him that he better luck next year. As Bakugou would just cough out a little bit of blood, as he would smile towards Deku, telling him, well, looks like you got me beat this year, but don't get ahead of yourself. I'll catch up. As, Deku would look towards Bakugou and tell him that he hopes he does. As he would grab Bakugou and throw him over his shoulders, he would take him to Recovery Girl, as this is when the provisional license exam would pretty much be over, as Gang Orca would be announced. But before Inasa and Todoroki could basically, have their little dispute that they did in canon, Deku would have arrived and taken down Gang Orca single-handedly, also telling Inasa to get his head in the game, as Inasa would have stopped focusing on Todoroki and would have ended up rushing over to the people who need help, doing essentially nothing but rescue hero stuff, as he would have ran around helping a bunch of people, and this would have led to Inasa actually passing, with the only 2 people passing from each class being the same, Todoroki and Bakugou. As, this is essentially how that entire situation would end up playing out, and this is when we would now actually cut on over to when we would now have the them go back to school. As in terms of UA, they would be having their other portion of their internships, as they would be asked to go to their normal stuff. As in this version of events, Bakugou would have actually been the one who was asked by Mirio to go to his internship. Even though he doesn't have one for all, he would see the incredible potential in Bakugou, and he thinks that Sir Nide could definitely help him bring that out and flesh his potential out more than it already is. As, Bakugou would end up utterly accepting, and this is when we would have the overhaul stuff happening. Except this time, a lot of things would actually end up going different. See, this time, when Overhaul would have actually ended up losing Eri in the alleyway, with a combination of Bakugou and Mirio, they would have actually been able to take down Overhaul, sorry. Seeing as, Mirio could permeate, and seeing as Overhaul's quirks to touch things, he wouldn't have quite been able to basically take Mirio down, as Mirio would have phased right through him, and in a sort of Minato fashion, gone behind Overhaul, as he would have punched him with a full 40% smash, breaking his spine. As he would send Overhaul flying, crashing straight into a building, as he would have restrained him with cuffs, and he would have then interrogated him, as the Eri situation or the Overhaul arc would have been taken care of, very easily, as Deku would have ended up still going to Edshot's agency once again, seeing as he was one of his mentors, and this is when Deku would proceed to basically just go along with the raid of the Yakuza, basically where where they basically did the raid where they were supposed to save Eri. This time a couple of things would have changed, seeing as Eri was already safe, so all they had to do was take down the remaining Yakuza family members. So this is when the pro heroes who were there, with the inclusion of Edshot and Deku, would arrive, as they would proceed to basically take down every and any villain, as Deku would essentially be there to back up Sun Eater, as well as Edshot with the villains that he had to take down, and the entire Yakuza family organization would have been taken down, with Overhaul being taken into custody, and that's essentially how that situation would end up panning out. See, the main villains that we essentially have doing the biggest threats in terms of what's going on in this version would have already been taken down, such as Overhaul and, All For One, with the only remaining being, the League of Redestro's army, those being the real only threats that they have. But seeing as this version of Deku was able to take down Overhaul and, all for one. In this version, well, not exactly him by himself, but he played a big part in taking down those two organizations. A lot of the other villains would have actually standed down, such as people like Gentle Criminal would have decided that it's better for them to stay away from that, as if they get caught, they're just going to be sent to Tartarus, where all of the rest of the villains are, and they decide that it would be a lot of smarter choice to basically stay away, as this generation's heroes are way more, capable than the pro heroes that are active now, as crime rate would have ended up dropping across Japan as a whole, as this is when we would now have the little UA Sports Festival, as Shiketsu High would end up attending it, and this is when we would have basically a little bit of a happy ending, as by the end of it, we would now have one final fight against Bakugou and, Deku, which, Deku would end up utterly defeating Bakugou again, as Bakugou would have accepted that Deku at this point would have already became stronger than him, as after all this training that he would have done, by the end of everything, we're just going to have a little bit of a time skip to 3 years in the future, as now, Deku and Bakugou would have graduated, and at this point, it would have been utterly clear that Deku was the one who ended up winning and becoming the #1 hero of Japan. As this is where we're going to be ending our story, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed the tale of what if Deku went to Shiketsu High. And, with that being said, I hope you guys can go down in the comments below. Let me know what you guys thought of this series, as I had a lot of fun making it. And let me know what series you guys want to see next. Let me know, what you guys thought of the video. And definitely smash that like button, as well as hit the subscribe button, as a big percentage of you guys are actually not subscribed to the channel, which is a little disheartening. But, I'm still going to continue to drop these bangers on bangers. So with that being said, guys, you guys already know the drill, and I'm just gonna wait until 24 minutes in the video. So it has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.